Hey, this is Sky. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So I was on another guy's channel on YouTube that I follow, Big Herc 916, and he's a really great guy, and he drops a lot of knowledge. I love his channel, and he's a really good person. Um, and I made a comment on his channel on one of his videos, and then somebody replied to my comment, and the topic got onto homelessness. So I figured I'd make a video on homelessness. I'm not sure if I've talked about this before specifically. I know I've mentioned it in other videos. I was homeless for 2 years, from the time I was 18 till about the time I was 20. It was that technically, if you want to count the months, it may have been just a little under 2 years. I was out in Southern California. I lived in the streets, and I was a full-time bum. I wasn't couch surfing on friend's house. When you live on a couch at your friend's house, maybe you might be homeless, but that's not what I'm talking about. And we've all seen these people in our towns. I don't care what town you live in, whether it's Little Rock, Arkansas, Bangor, Maine, Miami, Florida, San Diego, doesn't matter where you live. They're everywhere. I live in a small town, Daytona Beach, Florida. In the last, 5 years, the homeless situation everywhere. Bums are everywhere. And there's a lot of different reasons. We can talk about politics, we can talk about economics. There's a lot of different reasons for homelessness. A lot of people want to blame bums, blame homeless people for their own situation, blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting into none of that in this video. You can talk about that on your own. I don't really care. All I'm going to talk about is my own personal experience. I went homeless not because of a drug addiction. I wasn't a crackhead. I had done drugs like that. When I was a crackhead, I used to rob people for crack. Not as a bum in an alleyway, but ski mask style, busting down fucking crack house doors and, putting everybody on the floor. We used to do it real deal style. Go down to a park where people are selling drugs and rob the whole fucking park. Take your projects over, rob your whole fucking projects. So we were those kind of guys. I wasn't a bum on the streets doing meth, doing pills, doing heroin. I went homeless because of what I think was really a mental problem. I chose to go homeless. It felt like the best option at the time. And I could go off on a tangent on that, really, on that statement, because philosophically speaking, man, meaning humans, always act rightly. And what I mean by that is people always act in their best interests. Even the most failed, stupid decision, in that dumbass Forrest Gump motherfucker's brain, he thinks he's making the right choice. So that's what I mean by man always acts rightly. I've known people that have done the dumbest shit, go on revenge missions over the dumbest shit, and you're like, wait a minute, snap out of it, you can't do this. And they think they're acting right. They think that they're perfectly justified. So people always act right, even in the worst scenarios. And so when I say man always acts rightly, I don't mean that they're always doing the right thing. And I thought I was doing the right thing for myself, and it wasn't. I went homeless, and I guess it was kind of an economic choice, kind of a freedom choice. Nonetheless, it happened. And I started off living out of my van and bopping from town to town, parking space to parking space. It became very difficult to find places to park the van where residents of neighborhoods or police or whatever wouldn't hassle me. I found lots of other homeless people in the town I was living at, and it is kind of a social scene. You may operate on your own for a little bit, but eventually you're going to want social interaction, and people on the streets, they know who else is on the streets. There could be a crowded street full of people, and if a bum walks down that street and another bum's on that street, he'll be able to pick you out. We know who our people are. We know this society is stratified through classes, socially stratified like a pyramid, and we are the homeless. We are at the very bottom, below the ghetto people. People in the ghetto think that they're at the bottom. There's a level below you, a forgotten level, a level that people don't want to see, that they want to brush aside. And I've been in that group. And it's a hard life. And I'm going to give you a rule. This is a rule. It goes across the board. And I didn't make this rule up. I learned this rule from others on the streets. You have a window of opportunity to get yourself out of that situation. And you will have to get yourself out of it, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. That window is about a year to 2 years. If you go homeless, just like you're drowning, you need to fight to survive quick. You can't say, well, I'll try to save myself in 5 minutes. You'll be dead in 5 minutes. You have to start struggling and kicking and splashing. Do it while you have the strength in you. And that's the same thing with being homeless. That first year is your opportunity to save yourself, to swim to shore. The second year, you can still do it, but you're slipping. You will see. I'm not going to tell anybody to go test this out. You have to take my word for it. Being homeless is one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever been through. And I've been through a lot. Watch some of my videos. I've been through a lot of bullshit. Being homeless was the worst. I don't wish that on nobody. I'd rather do life in prison, sit in a box, sit in a cage in fucking Supermax with only 45 minutes out in another little cage to wreck. I'd rather do that than to go back to the streets. That's how bad it is. I found myself meeting other homeless people. They turned me on to various services. Each town is set up differently. Homeless services depend on your town. You could be in California, you could be in, say, for example, one city that has very little resources for homeless people. Few church groups, no community development programs that are passing out free food or blankets at night, none of that shit. There's communities that have nothing. And those homeless people end up to be barbarians very quickly because it's a survival thing. Me, I had good camping skills. I did a fucking Outward Bound program when I was like 16. And that's like this survival shit. My mom sent me on it to try to make a man out of me. And we went out in the woods for like a month, 6 weeks, something like that, and did various woods things and learned how to hunt and fish and caving and rock climbing and hiking and backpacking and you name it, we learned it all. So by the time I was 18 and I went homeless, 2 years later when I graduated high school is when I went homeless. Yeah, I had camping skills. I can survive. I know how to find food, water, shelter. I know all those tricks, that kind of stuff. I'd already been trained for that stuff. So the survival aspect of being homeless for me wasn't as difficult of a transition as some other people. If you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth and you don't know how to go camping very successfully, that kind of experience is really uncomfortable for you. Sleeping outside and having to forage and survive without money in your pocket and without a McDonald's nearby. That can be really painful. But any situation that's new to people can be painful. I don't really care about teaching people those lessons. You can go learn that shit on your own. What I wanted to talk about in this video specifically is how to get yourself off the streets. And I can run through it really quickly. That's why I didn't make this entire video about that one point. I'll make it at the end of this video. To get yourself off the streets, you may have a scenario where you got yourself on the streets, and that's most likely the case. Every single person that I met on the streets was there because they had got themselves into it. It was a drug addiction, mostly drug addiction, some of it alcohol addiction. There were almost none. I don't think I met a single person. I don't think I met one. Now, it may be different now, but I'm just talking about my experience. I didn't meet a single person who said that they were on the streets because they lost all their money at the stock market or their house burned down or whatever hearts, and they were like, well, this is where I am. I had no choice in the matter. 99.999% of all the men that were on the streets that I met, there were very few women. There are lots of women out there, but I didn't meet a lot of women on the streets. I met a lot of guys. Almost all of the men, didn't matter what age, 18 or 80. They were all either drug addicts or alcoholics, and they were all dumped by their wives or girlfriends and decided to go on a binge and live out in the streets. Almost all of them were that way. And I was in LA when this happened, so there's a lot of homeless people there. Everybody, oceans of homeless, all of them there for the same reason. Drug addicts and their old lady dumped them. That's what every motherfucker said. So they got themselves there, and that's the point. And I got myself there. I chose to get there. So you're going to have to get yourself out of it. People aren't going to come save you. A homeless shelter and these services that are provided, free food and all that kind of stuff, they're helpful. and get those things, because you can utilize those things in order to lessen your survival needs, so then you can focus on other aspects of, the betterment of self and trying to get yourself out of the situation. So use those resources. But those are camping skills. The way you're going to get out of being homeless is through your own mental strength. You're going to have to buck up. And that's why I gave you that rule in the beginning of the window of 1 to 2 years. People that are homeless 1 to 2 years have a much easier time. I was homeless for about 2 years. I had a much easier time. I could feel my mental state slipping. I knew that I was about to go under. And once you go under, once that you have slipped into that mental fucking insanity of that homeless world out there, and a lot of people get slipped into that. It takes a couple years. It's really hard. I'm not going to say you're doomed and you're hopeless and you can't get out of it, but it's going to be a lot harder for you, because you're going to have to overcome a serious mental affliction. And I don't care how strong you are in the beginning. This happens to everybody. So you're going to have to get yourself out of it. And that's what I did for myself. So I don't have a miraculous story with this, as far as I, got myself out this way or that way, and you can be like, oh my God, that's amazing, and stand up and clap. You're such a hero for doing that. It was just a decision that I made. And one day I decided, because I had kind of recognized that my life was spiraling out of control. I was the loser in town. And I still had some sense of who I was left. And that's why I say that 1 to 2 year window is important, because that's what you're losing in that first couple of years. You're losing who you are. You have to maintain who you are. And I still had who I was. So I was able to sit down and be the same guy I always was, and sit down. I went and sat down in the park, and I said, I'm going to fight and struggle to, to climb this mountain. I'm getting out of this situation. I'm breaking out of here, So I did 2 things. And like I said, I didn't have a crack addiction that sent me, or a meth addiction that sent me, so it was a little easier for me. I was on drugs and I had alcohol problems, but I wasn't on the streets for those reasons. I wasn't far gone like that. So if you have addictions like that, that's going to be your first step. For me, would be to manage that shit. For me, it was a mental decision. And sure, I had no money, but I decided that I was going to start getting my shit together. So using the resources that I had, with being able to find food and my foraging skills, my camping skills, that really helped me, because instead of spending my day trying to struggle to find money, beg for money, I never begged for money. I never dumpster dived. Never. And instead of trying to waste my time doing shit like that everybody else is doing, collecting cans so they could get $2, so they could go buy a fucking burrito and a beer, or a couple loose cigarettes. I wasn't wasting hours a day doing that. I was utilizing the free services that were around me. I could go and get food at the church every single morning, and that would be my breakfast. I could make a couple egg salad sandwiches at that church thing, and that would be my lunch. Every single morning, my breakfast and my lunch are handled. If I couldn't find dinner, I know that I had a couple meals today and I can survive. I had something in my belly. So I could spend hours every day of doing whatever I wanted. Now, I used to spend those hours every day wasting time, getting high, running with this Jamaican gang, doing all kinds of fucked up shit, stuff that was keeping me in the streets. When I made the decision in that park that one day to get myself off the streets, I knew that all of a sudden I had all this time on my hands. I have 13, 14 something hours a day that I can spend to try to climb to shore. And I was only 2 years in, so I could still kind of see land. So the first thing I did was make that mental choice and to try to utilize my time well, so I could go and figure out how to make money. Now, me personally, I sold drugs, and I used that opportunity to sell drugs in the streets, even if it was just nickel and dime bag bullshit, to try to start racking up some money and start saving up some money. So I slowed down everything else in my life and didn't hang out with people anymore. I would just sell my dope, take my money, go back to my van, go to bed early, 6 or 7 o'clock, and just started to live this different lifestyle, change everything. The second thing I did was allow people around me that I knew, especially people from my past, and I did an inventory of who likes me and who do I still know that would be willing to fuck with me. And I contacted them, and this was before computers. There was no email. There was no such thing as cell phones. We didn't have communication like that. I had to write letters, stamps, and send that shit off, and then wait for something to come back, and I had no address. So I had to use other people's addresses and check their mailboxes and shit. And finally got a word from somebody back east. I was in California. I got a word from my homeboy Jason, best friend in the world. We grew up together on the block together. And he was just like, fuck yeah, I got a sofa, I got an extra room, come here, stay with me free of charge, no problem, whatever you need. So all I had to do was get across country. I had someone to help me. And that was me reaching out to them. That help could have been there for me earlier. I was refusing help. That's also something that a lot of homeless people go through, and that's part of your mental affliction that will get worse after 2 years. You will refuse help like a fool. I accepted help. It's important to put your tail between your legs and just accept help from others. And I accepted that help from a friend, and then all I had to do was figure out how to get across the country. That's a whole nother video. That journey getting across country was part of the struggle. It felt like I went through all kinds of barriers. It felt like one of these Lord of the Rings type journeys with enemies and police and you name it. It was a crazy trip. That's a whole nother video. But that's how I got myself off the streets. Just plain and simple. It was a decision and allowing myself to get help. And it was all mental. It was all inside. It wasn't a homeless shelter that got me off the streets. Those types of scenario people and organizations will just simply help you maintain your homeless life. They're not going to help you get out of your homeless life. They're just going to help you survive the night so you can stay homeless. Those are not going to help you. No one's going to help you. No one's going to come and find you and say, oh, there you are. We've been looking for you. Come with us and, now we'll do everything for you. That's a fantasy. You're going to have to do it yourself. You're going to have to crawl out of that bullshit hole that you live in, your campsite, wherever the fuck that you stay, you stay, and look around you with these losers that you fucking surrounded yourself with and say, none of this no more. I'm out of here. Just like you're in prison. I'm scaling the wall and I'm gone. I don't care if none of you come with me. This is just about me this time. And you're going to have to make it the most selfish act you've ever done. Struggle and fight to survive. This is your life. It's survival. You have to have a sense of self-preservation. After a couple years, you will lose that. You'll give up. So, fight to survive. Being homeless is no joke. There's a lot of homeless vets out there. When you see these homeless guys out in the streets and you want to shake your fist at them out your car and yell at them. I know a guy who does that every time he sees bums on the street corner. He yells at him, get a job! He hates them. And I tell him, look, man, 1 in 3, something like that. It's like 1 in 3 returning vets are homeless. A lot of them young guys you see out there were doing the right thing and got failed by our country. And sure, they have an active role in this decision. They didn't get thrown into the streets by the government. They got thrown into the streets by their own stupid actions and drug addictions and shit like that. But you got to have some sympathy for these individuals, and they can be saved. You can't give up on humanity. You can't give up on yourself. So thanks for watching.